Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Valkyria Chronicles with Ungainly Titan. Well, in this case, our heroes have made it back to Rangriz, which is the capital of Gallia, and they've enlisted in the militia. So they're both reporting to Eleanor Varot, who is the captain of the militia regiment that they've been assigned to, and she introduces them to some of the fellow squad commanders, who are essentially platoon commanders. Wilkin Gunter is promoted to a lieutenant, and he's in charge of Squad 7. There's a friend of his from the university who turns out to be commander of Squad 1. Alicia gets promoted to a sergeant in Squad 7. So they kind of meet up, and then you're kind of introduced to the command sections of the game. So the next thing here is you have the squad barracks. Now, I don't visit the squad barracks at this point in time, but essentially it's a list of the various troopers that you've got in the squad and what they can do, what their traits are and stuff like that. The next one is the command room, the training facility and the R&D facility. The command room is where you can recruit fresh members into your squad or dismiss existing members of the squad if you find that they're unsuitable for whatever reason. The different soldiers in the squad that constitute the members of your squad, they have different classes of soldiers, but they also have different personal characteristics, certain traits that affect how they interact with the environment, with people, and some stuff at their advantage, and some places they're at a disadvantage, and various other things like that. I think they also have the potential for hidden potential that can be expressed or come to the fore during training, or possibly during combat. And all of these things add up to various stuff that's kind of connect to synergies, and some people like each other and dislike others and stuff like that. So you have your basic units. You have scouts, which is mostly what we've been playing with so far, at least on your side. So Alicia is a scout. High mobility, moderate attack and defense. They're very good at sort of a flanking, acting as a reserve, observing. The regular units are shock troopers. They're the kind of the toughest attack and defense. They have much lower mobility than scouts, possibly half the mobility of scouts. Lancers are specialised anti-tank units, and they're not much good for anything that's not anti-tank as far as I can tell. They have somewhat lower mobility than shock troopers, but not by much. But they're really one thing, and they're good for us taking out tanks, and they're better at taking out tanks from what I can see than tanks. They've got better mobility than tanks for starters, and they will find it easier to get into rearward positions. Shooting a tank in the glowing radiator at the back is an extremely effective tactic, but it's very effective if you're using Lancers. Then you have engineers, which are basically a support unit. They can resupply Lancers who have limited ammunition supplies and don't recover much ammunition in the start of return. They can also supply medical assistance. They can repair tanks, repair facilities, help out with building fortifications and various other things like that. And then you have snipers. Now, I have found snipers to be the most difficult unit to utilise. They have very low mobility. They fire one shot, although it can be quite devastating if it hits. But it seems to me they're best used in a rearward and probably best used in an offensive scenario. And so far I haven't had any defensive scenarios, so I have found snipers to be rather difficult to make use of. Then there is the training grounds run by the drill instructor, who is fulfilling all the Hollywood archetypes of DIs for a long period of time anyway. And the drill instructor basically allows you to spend experience. So you have so much experience that you accumulate from battles, either plotline battles, or you can also engage in skirmish battles, which are like optional side missions. They're like side missions in a role-playing game, and those optional battles accumulate experience and credits. And you can then spend the experience to level up your troops. So you have Scout level 1, Scout level 2, Scout level 3, and so on and so forth. The more levels, obviously, the more experienced, I think, and the better the troops are at doing their job. And apparently you can be underpowered, so you need to take a certain amount of maybe skirmish missions to bring up the power levels of your unit to match the power curve of the game. That's not to say that you have to spend do all the skirmish missions, but it's probably worthwhile doing a certain amount of them as you progress in order to keep your unit experience and credits to the maximum. One thing to note is that you can lose units permanently in skirmish battles as well, as in the plotline battles. It's difficult enough to lose units, and I'll go into that in a minute. The next area is R&D, and in R&D you basically spend credits to upgrade equipment. So you can upgrade the troopers' equipment, or you can upgrade the tanks. There's a limited amount of equipment you can fit in the tanks, and there's looks like a fixed development cycle. You don't have to make decisions about what to upgrade weapons with. You just spend the money on what's available. This brings us to our first combat mission, our first plotline combat mission after Rangris, after the main story, and they're now in the militia. And you have to mount this two-prong attack on an Imperial position. So you have a camp in the town, and you have to defend the camp. That's your base. And it's a capture the flag scenario. All the combat missions seem to me to be capture the flag type scenarios. You have some fixed personnel. In this case, you have people who are already assigned, and then you have other people that you must assign to complement the people already assigned. So you have two locations. You have the base in the town, which you're looking at here, and I have 4 places to assign on the base. And then once I have the base assigned, then I have an assault unit out on the edge of the city that start out in open countryside, but will finish up in the city, and then I'll assign a number of forces. I think it's 3 or 5, yes, 5, but I'll have the tank. The Edelweiss will be part of that. It's already a pre-assigned unit on that side of the battlefield. In this particular scenario, we can't retreat units, nor do we get any reinforcements. However, in subsequent scenarios, at least one of the ones that I've played after this, the possibility of retreating units through a base is open to us, so that if you have a base, you can spend a command point. If your unit is close enough to the flag, an option to retreat appears. So you could retreat the unit, and once you have created a space in your roster, you could then shuffle in a new unit from the reserve, but the retreat and the replacement both cost a command point. You spend the command point on the unit that you want to retreat to move it close enough to the base to get the retreat option, and you spend the unit you want to replace by spending a command point on the base to summon the retrieved unit. Normally, one of the things you can do in those kind of scenarios is that if a unit becomes wounded, you can utilize the retreat option. The unit retreats effectively if it's if a medic is brought to it, or if it dies. If it comes in contact with an enemy soldier, or an enemy soldier comes in contact with it in the enemy's turn, then you have a hole in your roster, and you can use the base to replace that unit. As far as I know, it's not available in this scenario. It certainly wasn't announced as part of the list of things that I could do, but it is something that's introduced in the next scenario. So here we have the 2 wings of my force. So you have one of them in the base on the left hand side, and the one on the right hand side of the attacking force. And initially they're up against 2 enemy troopers. Now the temptation is to use the tank, but one of the things is the tank, shock troopers are actually the most effective assault units. The tank is very good at pushing through an area, and it'll push into the enemy. Doesn't take much damage from small arms fire, certainly not from the front. Potentially, it is said that a tank could be taken out by small arms fire to the rear, to the radiator, but I don't know how effective that is. I've never really had to try it. It doesn't seem to me that it does a lot of damage, but it depends on how damaged the tank is already. I think as the tank takes damage, it seems to me it becomes more vulnerable to critical hits. So you have, I've moved up 2 units here. We have uncovered another enemy hidden in the long grass. We haven't managed to get rid of him, and now I'm going to activate the tank. I found the tank to be quite difficult to steer. It's very twitchy with the mouse, so you have to be very careful holding the mouse. And it's supposed to respond to the WSAD keys and drive forward, but I have found somewhat twitchy, and reverse to be quite tricky. But it's also a unit you're inclined to overuse, because it's if you lose the tank, you tend to lose the scenarios. And so far that I've played, you lose Welkin in the tank, that's it, you're out of action. And it is surprisingly vulnerable, and it actually is quite slow moving, so it takes a lot of action points to get it into position, to keep it in action. And this costs you, because if you're spending command points activating the tank, there might be more useful things you could have been doing, spending command points on, like using them on the shock troopers or the scouts. I have generally found the best offensive options generally are a combination of shock troopers and scouts, with the scouts specifically to do flanking and flush out just the existence of enemy units that might not be otherwise seen. They have a moderately good offensive capability, and they have very good movement. So you can push scouts out into wide flanking positions where they get clean shots out with no cover supporting on enemy units that have been softened up by shock troopers, and they can provide inflating defensive fire, which can be very powerful as well. So therefore, flexible, but you want to be, again, careful of them. They're not as robust as the shock troopers, but they have so much more movement, and the trouble with that movement, of course, is you can get them into trouble with that movement. There are quite a few terrain actions you can take, like crawling in grass, which makes you hidden, makes you harder to hit. Climbing ladders is another one up into high ground positions, which can be very powerful. What else? There's a few others. Obviously the retreating and capturing flags, various other things like that. Crouching behind certain types of cover, sandbags, for instance, and things like that. These are all things to watch out for and take advantage of when you're advancing in particular. Now, I used the last 2 action points to put some shock troopers into cover, because none of the people start out in cover behind the sandbags. They're all standing in the open, and it also allows me to get some preliminary fire into enemy shock troopers that have line of sight on the location. Not effective fire, because they're quite a distance, and you don't know how many shots is required to take them out, because you can see here when you go into the aim, the to kill is question marked, even though I've got like 20 shots to fire. But it's less about the shooting, more about the ability to put the 2 units into cover, so that when the enemy shock troopers advance, the lead units they contact with will be in cover, and therefore less vulnerable to critical hits and headshots. Now it's the enemy's turn, and they start advancing units, so it's the same procedure the enemy gets. They get to advance units, have a tendency to advance beyond what is sensible, and push themselves into positions where they don't have proper cover or things like that. Although I'd say he wasn't too bad, but you'll see this guy now rushing forward far beyond the point that I would have pushed him into, because he's now out in the open here attempting to fire at a large number of defenders. Now I think Nina's the only one firing back, because she's the point unit in contact. I have a 3rd shock trooper in the base, and if I had moved that shock trooper up to the side sandbags, I think he would also, or that shock trooper would also have gotten a defensive fire on the advancing enemy trooper. I don't think the Lancers react to troopers that think their stuff is exclusively held against or offensive actions against enemy tanks, or whatever else they want to use them for. On the offensive phase, you can fire Lancers at the Lancers missiles at ground troops as well, but they're not as effective as using small arms. That enemy unit was an officer and had a command point associated with him, so those command points have disappeared, and the enemy now have 1 command point less. Alicia has a command point in my side. I think Largo does as well, so some of my command points come from units that give leadership bonuses. Obviously, if I lose Welkin and the Edelweiss, I've lost the whole scenario, so it's game over, and I have to try again, because this is a plot point area that I have to get through or past the plot in order to continue on. The units, the enemy don't have to kill everybody in the base in order to get into the base, in order to take it out. All they have to do is get a unit associated next to the flag with enough action points left to activate the take over the base or capture the base option and swap over the flags on the base, and then the base becomes an enemy base and I've lost the scenario. Orders are something I can issue at a squad-wide level, but I don't think I have anything useful. I think I have something like evade or enhanced evade, which I'm not sure is something that I want to activate at the moment. I don't know what the advantage of doing it is. Evade boosts, yeah, it costs a command point, and I don't see the advantage of issuing it at the moment because command points are pretty precious. And it takes a lot of command points, for instance, to get the tank into anywhere useful. And ultimately, I will need to get the Edelweiss up to take out the enemy tank. It's the lower risk, more efficient way of doing it. Bringing up Lancers. Although, you know, I'd wonder. I think I'd probably do it with Lancers for less. It's difficult to say which is the best option. So we've only managed to get the Edelweiss halfway, and we haven't even made contact with the enemy. So we're going to have to spend another two command points to move it to the corner of the building. As I've said, I have found steering in it be quite finicky. Now I move it here to the corner of the building. I had a limited field of view of somebody there. I think there's probably somebody on the roof, but I didn't realise it at the time. And I now see the enemy light tank. I have a scout as well, and I might want to get rid of him so I can switch the mortar around because it's more effective as an anti-personnel weapon than using the main cannon. So that severely damages the scout and actually takes him out, and also takes out the sandbags he was hiding behind. You're kind of warned in the game about over-relying on the Edelweiss as well, because it can rob you of too many action points. And there I've run into trouble. I was trying to reverse it, and I think the fact that the mouse was pointing in front of the tank meant that I tried to turn around rather than actually reverse. So that's the sort of stuff to watch out for. So we shoot at the enemy tank, and I think we miss completely and hit the tree or something like that. And again, yes, I make a mess of reversing the tank. So now I have 3 more action points, and as I said, it's probably best spent by bringing units forward. So I'm going to bring Cherry forward initially because she is a scout unit and has very good mobility, and what I'm planning to do is put her up on that roof. There's a ladder symbol on the map here, and I now can climb the ladder. Takes me to the top of the roof, and I see an enemy shock trooper. Now, generally a scout won't take out a shock trooper in one go, but normally they should be able to survive the shock trooper's return fire. However, Sherry cuts together a critical hit and is now out of the combat. I have 3 turns to get a unit to her, unless the enemy shock trooper went up to her first, in which case she would be dead and completely removed from the game. If I get an ally to her before she dies, she expires, then the ally will summon a medic. And so I decided that since there's a shock trooper on the roof, because it's not always, not sure that's a guaranteed thing. I know I've played the scenario before, but as you notice here, the a shock trooper doesn't have the movement to make it the same distance that Cherry made in one move. It will actually take 2 moves, and I still will have less movement points, action points. And also, when I move more than once, I finish up with less action points for each phase that I move. And that will stand out more clearly in a later episode where I'll be moving Alicia many times in a particular turn. Rosie, on the other hand, is made of sterner stuff, and she's a shock trooper herself, so she blows the enemy shock trooper off the roof and has now cleared the roof, and this is a very strong position to shoot enemy units from. So now I have no more action points left, so I have to be in the phase, and it's no more command points either, so it's now the enemy's turn. And they move the tank to shoot at the Edelweiss and knock a chunk out of it. One of the things is that every time the Edelweiss is shot at and not killed, you get a welkin saying, "Oh, minor damage done to the Edelweiss." Ignore him, because you get the impression there's not a lot of damage being done, and the next thing the bloody tank is dead. So you better keep an eye on its hit points. So when it gets below 50%, you want to be very careful with it. As I've discovered to my cost, not in this scenario. This scenario is relatively easy, but the next one is much tougher, and I found it to be quite difficult to keep the Edelweiss alive in it. Now, an enemy tank is broken through here, and this is the real critical threat, but I have 2 Lancers. So that should enable me to deal with this tank without too much difficulty. And some more movement around by the enemy. And more enemy movement again that I can't see, so it goes to the map, and then it goes back to my phase. Certain units, like I said, in this case, shock troopers have limited amounts of ammunition. So if you wait a turn, if you don't activate a unit for an entire turn, it'll recover limited supplies. So ammunition, I think healing supplies. You can restock by an engineer, or you can restock by being adjacent to a base. And it's back around to me again, so I'm now going to activate the Edelweiss. Now, in hindsight, I should probably be better off if I moved up the Edelweiss closer. Because quite a few of my shots missed at this range, and I'd be better off shooting the enemy tank at a closer range and being guaranteed the hit. I also think the last shot was quite possibly repaired by an engineer. So that light tank is taking some damage, but a lot of my subsequent shots don't. So we activate Largo to utilize his Lancer against the enemy tank. Now he's close enough to the enemy tank to allow the gun to activate, and he shoots, but doesn't seem to do much in the line of damage there. We then have to wait for the return fire to end, and then end his action. And I have a second Lancer, Yoko, and I can move Yoko into another position and also use Yoko to shoot back. So the first thing is I'm going to bring Yoko up into cover and then target the tank. So that's another shot from a lance, and now the tank is fairly seriously injured. It's gone to its last third of hit points, and another shot might actually end it. And getting rid of that tank makes a big difference to the assault on the base. So Largo has another shot left. He's 2 more shots left, but we're going to use this one. We fire and we blow up the tank. This takes out a command point. It also removes the tank completely from the game, but it doesn't remain as rubble or cover or anything like that, which I think it probably should. So that is the end of Largo's phase, and now I use my remaining 2 more points to activate the Edelweiss. We'll take another shot at the enemy tank, and we miss completely. Do no damage to the tank at all, which is a bit of a waste. So we end the action. We don't want to move any closer because we're some shelter from the walls, and we're going to take use of it, and we're going to activate Rosie on the roof because she's going to be firing down on people. I think she can negate cover from where she's shooting. So here we have an enemy scout facing off against our guys in the base, and Rosie is not close enough to the edge of the wall to get a clean shot, so I'm going to have to move her forward, and she's not deterred by the fact that she's potentially under fire from multiple enemies, which is what that flashy light potential thing kicked up was showing there when it was kicking off. Now that we've got her to the edge of the wall, we're going to use our remaining action points to move her back out from the edge of the wall so that nobody's got a direct line of fire on her. And then we end her action as well, and now what do I do? I'm going to bring up Alicia because she's falling behind and I don't want her back there where she's no good to anybody, and we might as well bring her into a frontline position where she can add her defense of the least as the enemy try and flank around the tank, for instance. I thought there was somebody there, but there isn't. So I'm going to push her forward a bit more so that I can get a line of sight on somebody in the enemy team, and there's a engineer. We put a few rounds into him. He's far away, so we don't get a lot of hits in comparison to what we might have expected. Now, I think rubble and furniture and stuff count as cover, even though I don't get the option of crouching behind them. But I do note that in the next battle, Captain Verrot is advising people to make use of walls and cover and back alleys and things like that against the enemy team. Now, we've managed to reduce the enemy down to 4 command points, but they're knocking socks out of the Edelweiss. More than I'm doing to it. That one missed again. So things are looking kind of grim there. However, I still have a full complement of command points. Now, one of the things I've noticed is to be careful of is if you're going to go driving the tank forward, make sure you have no friendly soldiers too close to it, because it tends to knock them down and drive over them and can injure them. So you're as well off not to do it. Again, I haven't quite moved close to the edge to get a clean field of fire at anyone, so I'd rather take out the fella, the nearest guy down here. Because, well, he's the front line. He's going to be engaged straight away, but we don't manage to take him out. He is, Rosie dodges his return fire, and I move her back out of the line of sight, but I feck up there again. I move her backwards and forwards. So then we stop the phase, because she should be safe enough there in the middle of the roof. And then I have to turn around and decide if I'm going to use her again, or do I want to use somebody else. So we activated Alicia, and there's a sandbag here position. We can move her forward too. Now she's under a lot of fire here, potentially from the tank as well as the enemy shock trooper, but he was already damaged by Rosie, and we managed to take him out. So that clears down the number of enemies that have a line of sight to her and can engage with her. And we now start up with the Edelweiss. Come on, drive. That missed again. But now I push forward. I should have done that the other way around, really. I should have driven the tank forward and then fired at the end of my movement rather than firing at the beginning of my movement, because you only get one fire, but that was a mistake on my part. And then I should stop fiddling with the mouse so the tank keeps changing direction. Although I suppose I have my armour angled. Then we activate the tank again and we shoot from much closer range, and we put that one through and do significant damage. So one more shot should finish the enemy tank. So I'm now going to bring the Edelweiss up to its point blank, so it's blocking the fire from the enemy base towards Alicia, so I can bring Alicia up behind the tank later on. And we activate the tank again because we have the movement point to do it, and I want to shoot and take this guy out before he gets to fire in his turn. So that takes the last remaining enemy tank out, and I advance a bit. I can't break through the floor bed, so I advance a bit further forward, but I don't want to show the back of the tank to the engineer. And I have one movement point left. So I can now use Alicia to clear out the engineer for me. She doesn't quite manage it, but he is down to one shot to kill. And now we're back around. So that's the end of that. So that's my last command point. So I now have no more actions left, and it's the enemy's turn. So enemies are going to activate in their phase, and they have 4 command points left. Looks as if their minimum. So that was the engineer, and he pulls out a Ragnite healing potion and uses it on himself to heal himself back to full. And then they spend the rest of it doing stuff that I can't see. Or at least none of my units have a line of sight on, so that I don't get any information about what they're doing hidden, and it doesn't have any time delay, it just executes it in the background. So we shoot at the engineer again, but we take him out this time, and the engineer is no more. So now I can advance. I probably should have advanced Alicia that time, but you can see as Alicia has diminishing pool of action points. So I advanced the Edelweiss because I want to clear the defenders. I want to clear cover out of this area. So I drop a mortar on this guy, and doesn't quite take him out, but it does leave him on very low health. I try and drive the tank on top of him, but I don't think that kills him or affects him in any serious way. And I didn't go and drive down the sandbags, so it at least demolishes the sandbags in front of this guy. And I established the Edelweiss down here at the corner, so I'm kind of shielding anybody who's going to be in the base. I then utilised Rosie, and again this manoeuvre was a bit of a mistake. This guy's blocking an approach from my base, but he's not actually serving any useful purpose. Now it does remove a command point from the enemy, but it would have been more useful if I'd actually put her killing the guy, one of the survivors of the Edelweiss's advance, and that would have made it easier for Alicia to storm into the base, because all she has to do is move into the base and change the flag and survive the experience. Now, because I'd moved Alicia once already, or had actually used her once already, I started out with only half the movement point. And because there was another stormtrooper still in action, I actually hid in this location rather than continuing my move. Given what I wanted to do, I'd better off continuing my move. She was only under fire for a short amount of time, and I would have had the action points probably to bring her behind the tank, but it doesn't. I used her to get rid of the shock trooper, or at least reduce his health considerably, and then I think I spend the rest of the time doing the same thing. So once again I activate, what do I activate? I activate Rosie this time because she's more effective firing. And at the time because I keep mixing up between turns and phases, it's resting for a full turn, I think, that really restores a character's action points and various other abilities, resets them. If you keep using them in the same turn, they just have a diminishing pool of resources to continue the effort for. They just basically get fatigued. It's like a fatigue rule. So here you can see Alicia has very few action points left, and barely get her across don't even get her across the street. Not even halfway across the street. So end the current action, see how we're doing in the turn. We have one more command point to spend, and I now use it to activate Alicia again, but I still can't make it to the flag or even behind my own tank, my allied tank. So potentially she's vulnerable to any unit that might come around the street corner and decide to take offense at her existence in the enemy phase. Now the enemy does its phase, but I don't know where it did it, and I don't know with what units it still has its generating command points from, but I presume it has some. So now it's back to my turn again. We activate Alicia, she has her full movement back, she reaches the flag, we click the occupy button, and away we go, we're occupying the enemy camp. Scenario completed, operation total victory. So that is the first phase of the plotline battle, and after that then we will have the second battle, which will be sort of next week. So I accumulate a certain amount of credits and a certain amount of experience, and I could spend that beforehand, before the next battle if I wished. I'd have upgraded my units even further, but I didn't actually get around to doing so. So that is, the next element then is, well, you're introduced to Elliot, the war correspondent, and then there is an interaction with the regular army, and the militia have a mission of retaking the Great Vasel Bridge, which apparently is a supremely difficult operation and requires some ingenuity. Also, a crisis occurs in the command while Welkin has been briefed by Captain Varrot. Largo and Rosie basically mutiny. They refuse to serve under a Greenhorn officer. The that they feel has no idea what he's doing, and they also refuse to serve with his Darksin mechanic driver, Isara. People with dark hair apparently are taboo, are considered, I don't know, unacceptable people or non-people or something along the lines. I don't know, suppose like because left-handed people were considered in some cultures to be witches, that sort of thing. Except here it's dark hair. I suppose like the Japanese idea that red hairs was associated with demon blood, or at least yokai blood. That sort of kind of stuff. And to resolve the crisis, Welkin basically comes up with gets the guys to promise that if he wins the next encounter, if he comes up with a strategy that's going to allow him to surprise the enemy and win the next encounter, that they will accept his command. And if he's successful, well, we'll see how it works out. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it interesting. If you did, please give it a like. If you've not already done so, please give the channel a subscription. I will catch you all again soon. Bye for now.